Great, thank you. And to that end then, I appreciate you taking the time to gather here today to hear the many communities' concerns. As I said, my name is Dominique Bautista, or Tsai Cheng-en, and I am of Filipino-Chinese descent. I do not speak Cantonese. I do not have relatives from Guangzhou, but from Fujian in the Philippines. I grew up in Richmond, a city that cannot and will never stand in place of Vancouver's Chinatown. While I have no ancestral ties to Vancouver's Chinatown, still, to me and many others, Chinatown is a reminder of how far we as communities of color have come in victories against systemic discrimination, but also how stagnant we remain in struggle with systemic discrimination. Today, I'd like to offer my experiences as a high school social studies teacher. I stand in opposition to BD's proposal of 105 Keefer. I taught social studies 10 at a high school in Richmond. Note that there are only 4 pages of content of Chinese Canadians in our textbooks to encompass an odious history of exclusion that has existed since 1858. So, where do I begin? By sharing histories that aren't located inside our books. As you know, 1907 marked Vancouver's peak of anti-Asian sentiments, culminating in a physical, violent rejection of folks who looked just like me. Beginning here at City Hall, then traveling with torches and stones to Japantown and Chinatown, a riot was born out of a colonial mentality attempted to rationalize xenophobia in a massed argument of protectionist capitalism of the seemingly middle class. I encourage you, like I did with my students, to Google the 1907 race riots and see the physical and emotional destruction that came from a movement of unchecked power that sought to displace the presence and history of Asian communities in Vancouver. I hope we will ensure that 105 Keefer will be different. 1964 marked the city's start of the urban renewal in Strathcona, a neighborhood that at the time was highly populated with a working class of immigrants, including Chinese settlers. The city released its National Film Board documentary, citing the need to eradicate urban blight from Vancouver's fringe neighborhoods, namely Chinatown and Strathcona, that were seemingly downtrodden and in need of repair and neglect from disease, the tropes of yellow peril. What was omitted, however, was how city services were intentionally paused, no garbage cleanup, no responses, perpetuating the narrative of how clearly, desperately, Strathcona needed urban renewal. And so, yet again, another argument masked in race, class, and capitalism. And so I encourage you, like I did with my students, to Google what blight looks like, how deeply dehumanizing it is that communities of color and their homes, their culture, their history were equated to a lifeless, rotting, oozing organism in need of eradication, all for the sake of life. I hope you will ensure that 105 Keefer will be different. And so here we are in 2017. The language of riots or blights might not be used, but are the intentions any different? A large reason why I became an educator was because I'd like to believe that understanding our past, by doing so, we can move forward to build a better future. So, Council, how is Vancouver moving forward? Modeling good governance, of espoused policies of equality dedicated to the care of youth, families, and seniors, an apology for the discrimination of Chinese Canadians. How are we rewriting past histories Vancouver isn't necessarily proud of? 105 Keefer is not just a Chinatown issue. It's not just about Vancouver. Rest assured, it's the president will educate our future generations about, beyond our textbooks. It's about 105 Keefer, how it's going to be a case of how race, class, and economics intersect, and quite literally, at what cost. 105 will be an example of how citizens put faith into their elected representatives and due process. 105 will be an example of power and of resiliency. But specifically, responding then to BD's proposal, with Vancouver's aging population, 25 units of social housing is unquestionably not enough, as you've heard endlessly and countlessly. And finally, despite the 4th iteration put forth, BD's proposal directly contradicts HA-1A rezoning policy, specifically 6A and 6B, as others have before me raised. History repeats itself only if we let it. So, council members, I urge you to consider the humbling privilege it must be to serve us in your communities. In moving forward with your consideration, what will 105 be remembered for? Step back to step up. History repeats itself, but only if you let it. Thank you.